I build things. In fact, that's pretty much what I've done for my whole life is build things. And like many of you in this room, I started out as a kid building things. Remember these places we built? They were safe, they were secure, they were private places, places of our own creation. And I believe it's in our DNA to create these kind of places, places that we share with only our closest companions. And as such, they're places of trust, places of wonder, places of mystery, and places of magic. Do you remember the magic? No, I know. We all grew up, right? We kind of lost contact with that magic. I know I did. But as I grew older, I never outgrew my love of building things. And I started out as a young man building houses, and then I moved on to apartment buildings, and soon it was office buildings, and then shopping centers, and even ski resorts. But the most powerful, the most compelling, the project that I worked on that has the most potential to actually do something good on this planet, the simplest, the most sublime, and the most sacred, is this simple mud hut. And I'm going to tell you more about this mud hut, or more about the process of building this kind of a structure. But first I want to tell you how I got there. How did I get to that point in my life where such a simple little shelter could be so impactful? I got there through death. Actually, I got there through becoming very close to death. A few years ago, I lost 3 very significant people in my life. My father, my father-in-law, and my best friend. They all died. They passed within a very short time of one another, very unexpectedly, and I was overwhelmed. And right after they had passed, I found myself having to undergo an emergency medical procedure. And I was being wheeled into the operating room, and the doctor had me sign a form. And that form said that I acknowledged that one of the outcomes of this procedure could be my own death. I signed it. But I walked in, wheeled in, and laid on the operating table, and I'm sitting there in this very sterile environment thinking of my companions who have preceded me, and thinking, is this the end? Is this really what could be my last moment, seeing this very sterile room? And as I started to undergo the influence of the anesthesia, all of a sudden, I left. I left my body. I could see my body down there. I could see the doctor working on my body. I could see the attendants helping him, but I wasn't there. I wasn't in my body. I wasn't even in the same room. Now, I can't tell you where I was because I really don't know. But I was having this drug-induced, out-of-body, alternate reality, lucid dream experience. I saw things very vividly, as vivid as standing in front of an audience of 100 people. I could see my whole life. I could see all the way back to when I was a child. I could see those sacred little shelters we built as kids, those places. I could see that magic. I could feel that magic again. And then I could see the progression, all those buildings that I built over my life. And I could see past the end of my life. I could see beyond my physical life. I could see the life of my buildings, and then I could see the end of my buildings. But I saw death in a whole new way through this process. I saw death not necessarily as this dark abyss, this black hole, but I saw death more as this necessary complement to life. That life and death are inexorably bound up in this relationship that transcends all time. That without life, there can be no death. Without death, there can be no life. That we need both of them. And I could see life on our planet from afar. I could see our beautiful little pale blue planet out there floating in the cosmos. And I could see that it was teeming with life from the very outer reaches of the stratosphere, the lowest trenches in the ocean. And that sacred relationship was entwined in every aspect of the globe. And I realized that our entire earth is sacred. And then I could see my life. I could see all those buildings that I had built. And I could see what happens at the end of their useful life. And this is what I could see. Because after we're gone, this is what happens to our buildings. They're destroyed. Now, you don't think about this because we don't see this aspect of our buildings very often. But the way that we build is a very linear process. We build by taking materials from the natural environment. We make them into building products. And then we make those building products into buildings. And at the end of their useful life, well after we're gone, we waste them. We demolish those buildings and we take that material and we throw it in the landfill. So much so that over 40% of the waste stream that goes into a landfill comes from the construction industry. 40% of all the resources that are consumed on this planet are consumed by the construction industry. It's a very disturbing realization. And we can't continue on this kind of a path. This linear take, make, waste process is completely incompatible with a finite planet. Yet we're consuming resources right now as if we had 2 or 3 of these as backup. We don't. Right now, if everyone on this planet built like we do in the first world, we would need 2 or 3 planets to support that level of consumption. If you add to that fact that the population right now on this planet is about 7 billion people, and we're going to go to 9 billion people in just 35 years. That's what the UN tells us. 9 billion people. And included in that 9 billion are going to be 1 billion people that are going to be displaced due to the effects of climate change. That's 3 billion people that are going to need shelter within the next 35 years. It's an amazing number. That's almost half of the world's population right now. And we certainly can't use that take, make, waste model to get us there. We can't create shelter using that broken system. We have to do something different. Now you say, well, why don't we just get the architects and engineers to come out and solve the problem? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen because 85% of the world's wealth is held by only 10% of the world's population. And that same 10% of the world's population consumes my colleagues' efforts and energy. 90% of architects, engineers, and other design professionals' design work goes towards satisfying those same 10%. It's obvious because they have the money. But what it means is that 90% of the world's population is underserved in terms of access to shelter, water and sanitation, and energy. So we have to kind of think, how can we do this differently? What could we possibly do differently? Well, if we can't look to our profession to help remedy this, I suggest we look back to what we did before we had my profession. If we look back to our ancestors and what they did for tens of thousands of years on this planet, there may lay the key. I know my ancestors came from Scotland and they built like this. Ancestors in North America built like this. And both of these ways of building are very much the same way that nature builds. See, the science of biomimicry has shown us that nature builds using locally available materials. Nature uses locally available energy sources. Nature builds incrementally. It doesn't build the whole thing at once and then try to fill it up. It builds as it needs. Nature does its chemistry in water, not high-tech solvents. Nature recycles everything. Now, I wanted to see if we could start to think about that. Could we emulate that again? And so I undertook a process to see if I could create safe, affordable, compassionate, responsible, ecological, and doable shelter in my own backyard. With the help of my daughter and her fiance, we just wanted to see if we could alter that take, make, waste linear process and make it cyclical. Could we take the waste from our building and compost it and turn it back into a resource nutrient? So this is what we did. We built a tiny straw bale. It's a load-bearing straw bale structure. It means it has no wood columns or other support structures. It's just straw. This is the construction sequence. We used a modular roof system. It was a very efficient way to span this little space. This little structure is about 200 square feet. It cost us a little over $5,000 in material and about 500 hours in labor to build it. We used only the resources that were within a very short distance to the site, straw from a local farmer. We dug the plaster material right on site and plastered the exterior walls with an earthen plaster. It yields a very durable, very safe, very fire retardant surface. Now, we got a lot of interest in our building. This is the completed structure. And we started having people just show up and want to know more about this structure. We had a local high school come to us and say, "Can you show our kids how to do this?" And so we did. We went to the high school and showed them kind of the basics of what we were thinking. We gave them scale model building blocks to play with, and they all of a sudden just took off. They started figuring it out. And in a very short amount of time, they said, "We want to build our own." And these kids, 14 to 17 years old, built their own tiny straw bale structure. And all we had to do was kind of just show them the basics, and they got it. They figured it out, and they were so empowered that they came up to me afterwards and said, "Thank you. I can build my own house now." It was an incredible transformation. These kids were now able, and they had that empowerment to do it themselves. This small space has attracted all kinds of people, and I can't tell you exactly why. People we don't even know would come to us and say, "Can we see your hut?" People would come. We had musicians come, and they just wanted to go into this place, and they would play music for hours on end. We'd just open this up and make it available. And we found that people like to congregate, people like to linger, people like to be in this space. People liked it because they could connect, they could have conversation. It was a very comfortable space, very, very connecting. Now, this tiny hut changed me. It changed me because when I started building this, I built it because I knew that we needed these kind of spaces physically. The demand is just so huge, and that broken system is so dysfunctional, we can't support it any longer. We have to do something a little bit different, and I am hoping that you'll join me in going this direction. But I also found out the change in me was that I realized that we need these places emotionally. We need these kind of places to connect with one another. We need these places to connect with the natural environment. We need these kind of places to connect with the earth. We need these kind of places to connect with who we are inside. I discovered we also need these places spiritually, places that we can contemplate the great mystery, places that we can commune with the Great Spirit, either by ourselves or with our closest companions, places of mystery, places of magic. And I hope that you will think about this, and I hope that you would actually undertake this process yourselves. I hope that you will build a tiny sacred shelter in your backyard and make it available to a refugee family who desperately needs some kind of safe place in this world. I hope you will build one of these in your backyard, make it available to a homeless person so they might gain some source of dignity again. I hope that you'll build a simple shelter in your backyard and make it available to a friend at a time of need. I hope that you will consider building one of these simple shelters in your backyard, mostly for yourselves, so that you can be part of that change that we so desperately need in this world. Now, Václav Havel once said that hope is not the conviction that something's going to turn out well, but the certainty that something makes sense regardless of how it turns out. Now, I hope you will join me in advancing this idea because it makes sense, because the old system isn't supportive anymore. And I look forward to your participation in the process. Thank you very much.